Garrett Mitchell Gall, known to most as Cleetus McFarland, officially finished 20th at Kansas Speedway on April 18, 2026. That number appears in the record books, but it tells almost none of the real story. What actually unfolded that afternoon included a brand new paint scheme, a genuinely funny pre-race joke, an 11-position charge through the field in the opening 5 laps, a run all the way up to 7th place, and then one of the most dramatic engine failures the ARCA Menard series has seen this season, complete with oil on the front stretch and 2 other cars crashing directly because of it. This was Cleetus McFarland's 6th career ARCA Menard series start at the national level, and it came at a critical moment. Just days before Kansas, NASCAR had denied him O'Reilly Auto Parts Series Superspeedway approval following his debut at Rockingham Speedway on April 4th, where he finished 32nd, 6 laps down, and spun twice. NASCAR President Steve O'Donnell addressed the decision by saying progression needed to be demonstrated race by race. So Cleetus arrived at Kansas carrying that denial, but also carrying real momentum, having finished 11th at Daytona earlier in 2026, and coming off a top 5 finish in ARCA East at Rockingham. Rita Jones Racing made their intentions clear, stating that Kansas was part of a deliberate plan to build seat time on 1.5-mile intermediate tracks. Cleetus rolled into Kansas with a brand new look on the number 30, prominently featuring baldeagle.com, his own merchandise and content platform. Since the sponsorship was essentially coming from his own brand, he was technically his own sponsor. Before the race, he leaned directly into that dynamic with one of the better lines of the weekend, saying he was going to get fired if he did not get a top 10. The punchline landed because the only person who could fire him was himself. It was self-aware, funny, and carried just enough truth to stick, especially considering how the afternoon would eventually play out. In pre-race practice, McFarland qualified 13th fastest, which was a legitimate indicator that he had pace and a setup that worked. Then inclement weather canceled qualifying entirely, and the official starting lineup dropped him all the way back to 25th on the grid. Just like that, any chance of a straightforward afternoon disappeared. If he wanted anything from Kansas, he was going to have to earn it the hard way by passing cars, managing traffic, and doing it at a track where dirty air and restarts punish even the most experienced drivers. Starting 25th, he moved up 11 positions in the first 5 laps. By the halfway break, he was running 11th. That is not inheriting positions because someone else spun out. That is a driver actively making progress, reading lanes, executing passes, and racing with a level of composure that had not always been visible in his earlier runs. He continued pushing forward and reached as high as 7th after a 3-wide pass on a mid-race restart. From 25th on the grid to 7th on pace, that is a legitimately eye-catching drive through the field at a 1.5-mile intermediate track, which was the exact discipline where his experience was thinnest. Running around 10th, the lap times began dropping slightly, and it was not a setup issue or a tire concern. It was the beginning of a mechanical failure working toward a complete breakdown. Smoke began appearing inside the car, and both the team and driver knew something serious was wrong. With about 25 laps remaining, the engine let go in a plume of white smoke and dumped oil across the front stretch. Andy Janowak and Isabella Robusta were running directly behind him and crashed in the oil, spinning and slamming the wall. ARCA officials displayed a red flag and halted the race to clean the surface. The engine had expired with the finish line still close enough to touch after all the hard work had already been done. Despite the full engine failure, Cleetus managed to keep the number 30 car in one piece as he slid sideways through his own oil in turns 1 and 2 without ever losing control. In the middle of smoke in the cockpit, oil on the track, and 2 cars crashing behind him, he kept the car off the wall. If that car had snapped hard right and hit the wall at that moment, the story of Kansas becomes significantly worse, both mechanically and in terms of the narrative surrounding his development. Instead, he threaded it through. The motor was finished, the race was finished, but he avoided turning a mechanical failure into a physical wreck. Coming out of the infield care center alongside NASCAR Cup Series driver Carson Hocevar, Cleetus delivered one of the more honest post-race assessments you will hear from anyone in a garage. He pointed to the drift through turns 1 and 2 as something he was genuinely looking forward to seeing on the highlight reel. He said overall he had a blast, made it 75 laps, and if the motor had blown at 50, he probably would have shed a tear. But since he made it through 75% of the race, he was calling it a win. He also circled back to the sponsor joke from before the race, noting that he hoped baldeagle.com would not drop him, which remained funny precisely because the only person making that call was himself. NASCAR EVP John Probst had addressed the broader situation before Kansas, making clear the sanctioning body was not hostile toward Cleetus and genuinely appreciated what he had brought to the sport. The position of NASCAR is measured, not adversarial. They want to see consistent, clean racecraft at progressively challenging levels before signing off on super speedway starts. A mechanical DNF does not erase what he showed in the laps leading up to it. The position trail from 25th to 7th, cut short only by the engine failure, is actually a stronger development argument than a clean but anonymous 15th place finish would have been, because Kansas showed pace, movement, composure, and the ability to execute passes in traffic on an intermediate track. Both Cleetus and George Siciliano, known as Squirrel McNutt, are confirmed to return for the ARCA Menard Series race at Talladega Superspeedway on April 25th. Squirrel had an impressive Kansas debut of his own, finishing 12th in his first main ARCA division start. For Cleetus specifically, Talladega is not unfamiliar territory as he finished 10th in the ARCA race there last season. He arrives with more stock car experience than he had a year ago, and if the run at Kansas carries any weight with the people evaluating his development at NASCAR, a strong result at Talladega becomes the kind of evidence that is very difficult to argue against.